How is everyone? You guys had nothing else to do on a Saturday?
Some of us are being forced.
Being forced. Oh, okay.
No,
So,
you should know in advance.
It's not you. It's not you.
okay.
It's
So,
not you.
I love forced audiences. So. All right. So everyone's working on a dissertation, trying to feverishly get this project in your past so you can move on with the next stage of your career. Well, I started doing these boot camps last year, and I think they're really helpful, even though we have people from multiple disciplines coming in. Hopefully, the series is going to provide you with some suggestions and ideas that are universal in nature, that apply with really any kind of design that you're doing. And sequentially, they go through and really kind of walk you through the whole process of setting up a dissertation so that you have something that is defendable, which is the ultimate goal. And then beyond that, that's going to be of some utility to people in your profession, in your field. So today's topic, I want to talk to you about problem and purpose statements, really framing the need for your study. What is it that you're doing and hoping to accomplish? So just so I can kind of maybe tailor some examples that I have, if we could just quickly go around the room, tell me kind of what area that you're in and what you're studying. We'll start over here.
I'm in curriculum and instruction. I am in the process of chapter 3.
Okay.
And the focus is about student autonomy as an intervention and their perceptions of how that relates to care theory.
Okay.
I'm also in curriculum and instruction, and I'm working on chapter 3 also, and I'm looking at scripted curriculum and versus like understanding by design.
Great.
Curriculum instruction. I am chapter 1, sort of, started, haven't written the first word, but at least I have a topic.
There you go.
I have a topic now, so this is timely for me. So I'm looking at the effects of natural disasters on teacher efficacy
Okay.
and student engagement, and or trauma, major trauma. So.
We haven't had any of those in a while, have we?
Yeah, no, we haven't had anything. It's
Yeah.
not timely at all, but I'm focusing on science teachers
Okay.
because that's what I am. I'm a science teacher, and so, yeah,
Great.
at least have that. It's something. It's a start.
I'm barely getting started.
Okay.
I'm waiting to hear on if I'm going to be accepted into the program as curriculum and instruction.
Okay.
I'm an adjunct here, though. I teach criminal justice courses.
Okay. Great.
Curriculum instruction, completing my first year, so I'm brand new.
Okay. Great.
Hi, I'm Amy Carter, and we've met before.
Yes.
Because I know your wife. We work together because I'm a first year seminar professor here, and I'm in my 24th hour of the CNI program.
Okay.
So I'm not even close to dissertation yet, but
Always good to have it on the radar there.
Rochelle Cortino, CNI, finishing 51 hours, so next semester start writing.
Okay.
Hopefully. Pamela Carrillo, also CNI, also finishing 51 hours. I'm on -2 chapter right now.
Okay.
Hi, so I'm in the fisheries program.
Okay.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
And I'm basically looking at where red drum go and what they're eating. So
Good.
I'll give you that kind of very simple overview of what it is.
Okay. So good. So it looks
I
like,
did my master's thesis. So just like,
oh, so you got experience and you can help. So.
awesome.
All right. So as I said, we're going to kind of go through this idea of problem statements, purpose statements. For those of you that maybe past this part, maybe you have these in your dissertation, but maybe this will be information that you could use to refine what you have. And that refinement will help you have a more solid product going forward. So everything that goes in your dissertation really is related. There's a connective tissue that runs through all the different components of your dissertation. It may seem like where you're doing it, that it's just a bunch of different hoops that you have to go through, whether it's this chapter, then this chapter, then this chapter, or sections in a particular chapter. But there is a rationale in how they go together. And so the three that we're going to kind of look at is your problem statement, the purpose of your study, and then the research questions that you have. Each should align with the other and provide some information guiding the development of these various components. So let's start with problem statements. Your problem statement should be a clear and concise description of what it is that needs to be addressed. Other than being a requirement for a doctoral program and to get the degree, dissertations should be taken on as a project and written up as a study to address a problem. There should be a need, something that is left unknown in our profession. So we're trying to find a way to fill a gap. Your problem statement is going to be the anchor of your entire dissertation. It's what's going to center and ground the work you do. Everything will relate back to this problem. So thinking about the different areas that you're interested in, some of you are a little more further along than others. What is the problem? What is it that we need to address? But in thinking of problems, a couple things I want you to take into consideration. What a problem statement is not. So problem statements are not questions to be answered. They are not topics to be studied, nor are they a plan for addressing a need that you have. All of these are components of your dissertation that play off of a problem statement, but by themselves, they don't represent a problem statement. So one of these age-old philosophical questions that we have: if a tree falls in the woods and no one is around to hear it, does it make any sound? All right. How do we know? If nobody heard it, how do we know what it does? All right. So similar thing with a dissertation and your problem statement. A lack of something is not a problem. It's what that lack of information, knowledge, or understanding precipitates. So is our lack of knowing whether a tree makes noise or not when it falls a problem? No, not necessarily. The problem is, what does that lack of knowledge mean for us? What can we do or what can we not do because we don't know whether it makes a noise? So when you start looking at your dissertations, and a lot of times people will write, my problem is that there's a lack of information about A, B, and C in my field. Well, there's a lot of lack of information about everything in the world. Not everything is something that we have to know. All right. Why did we purchase these tables with this finish and not a different color? That's a lack of information we have. Is it a problem? Unless you just have a real aversion to this color table, that itself is not the problem. But what does that problem precipitate? Well, maybe it has to do with funding, how much these tables are. Maybe they got a really good discount on these. So it's not the information lacking. That's the problem. So you probably heard this analogy before, that dissertation studies and research in general all should follow kind of this funnel approach. For the global dissertation, we always talk about you kind of start broad, narrow down into your specific study, and then we broaden it back out at the bottom. So we take what we know about the world, we narrow it down to our study, because really a dissertation should be inching the profession forward, addressing some component that's going to be a building block for future researchers. And then we take it out. Based on what we find, what are the implications for the profession? How is this going to be helpful, not just for my little neck of the woods, but how is it going to be helpful for people in my community, people in my state, people in my profession, people worldwide, whatever you're looking at. So in developing problem statements, These are the components that I think really help. So you need to have a hook. So how many of you are passionate about your topic or the field of study that you're in? So I would hope all of you raise your hand. You put a lot of time and money into this. If it's just a passing fancy, you probably could find other things to do. So you're invested in this. You feel passionate about this topic. You think it's important. Do other people share that same passion and desire? Maybe, maybe not. So the first element for you is finding this hook. How are you going to reel people in? And so we'll talk about these in a moment. Then you want to have an anchor. You want to ground it in something. A lot of times we could arouse people's passion and interest, but then we need to bring it back to them. So how does it affect you as the individual? Then we want to talk about some general implications. And then specifically, what is it that you're going to do? And that all leads to this idea of the gap. So what is that little niche that you're going to fill? So we'll look at these individually. So I like to think of the hook as something that is your 30-second television commercial. It's that little snippet that's going to pull people in and get them involved in your study. And so I talk with a lot of my doctoral students. How many of you have seen infomercials before? How many of you, well, a side study that I'll do here, how many of you have, how many of you have purchased something? Okay. So if you've noticed, almost all the infomercials follow a very similar format. So how do these commercials start out?
People acting really ridiculous and not being able to function without.
Yeah, the person who's really struggling to flip an egg in a pan. And it's like, So what is all that? A problem. All right, we're showing, look at this is a problem. What's going on here? All these things are problems. And they try to make it relatable. These are problems that everybody, common day folk, may have. Can't figure out how to sweep underneath a crack. Can't figure out how to flip eggs in a pan without getting them to stick. Can't figure out how to change a light bulb. So all these things that we do, they hook you in. They get you invested. They make you say, hey, yeah, that is something I can relate to. That is a problem. You may not have thought about it before. Probably in your day-to-day existence, you never go around thinking, man, if there's just a better way to flip an egg in a pan, my life would be so much better. But they highlight it for you. And so that's the same thing you do in your dissertation. You may, in your studies and your research and your experience, encounter things that may be problematic that the average person probably doesn't consider. And so one thing you need to do is hook people in, get them to see, why is this problematic? And so this is kind of related to your area. So we had someone before we were dealing with that was doing research in the area of some type of bacterial of some type of sea creature type thing. And so they talked about it, and I said, I don't know what half those words that you're saying mean. I don't know how it's relatable to me. And so he worked on the hook. He's like, well, this bacteria, if left unchecked and we don't figure out what it's doing, it could start affecting our fish and our populations of different seafoods. And for those of you that like to go eat seafood, there may not be seafood available for you to go eat. Okay, now you have me hooked in. I like going to eat seafood. Now it's relatable to me. I don't know what all the scientific terms are, but you kind of make it relatable. So think about that with your dissertation, because you're going to have people beyond your committee, hopefully, that read this and look at it. And so they want to know why it's important. Then you want to anchor it. You want to drive it home. I like to think of it, the anchor is putting the things that really stamp it for an individual that this is important. Things that I've found to be very helpful: definitions, statistics, quotations. things that you would typically find in newspaper articles.
So is this something like, say I want to study retention or something of that nature in higher ed?
Mhm.
I want to show the statistics that suggest the opposite, that it's kind of a dire situation.
Yeah, so what is,
We're only retaining 25% of the Hispanic students.
so let's say I don't work at a university, I don't have any affiliation with education. I don't know, is retention a problem? I see a lot of kids going to college now. We always put out this press release every fall, TAM-UCC, record enrollment every fall. We got a lot of kids coming, what's the problem? And so anchoring it for people, letting them know, yeah, we get people that come to college, but they don't all stay. And so numbers, I believe, really put a face to what you're talking about. So when we say retention is a big problem, what kind of big problem? Yes?
So when you're setting the tone for your newspaper article, is it more effective to play on people's like positive emotions or negative? Like with the fish example, it's really easy to say, imagine a world with no fish. And promote this, oh no, if we don't do something, we won't have any. Versus, don't you love the opportunity to take your kids fishing and positives? Like which one's the better one?
I don't think I don't see a preference either way, but I think the key is that you have that emotional connection that readers get invested in. They can see that, okay, yes, this research is going to make a difference that's impacting us. And much like, a lot of the research they do with punishment with children too. What's a better punishment? Taking away something they like or giving them a punishment they don't like? It's kind of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. But it's that idea of kind of making it relatable.
But in terms of like, because you said like the newspaper article, or if I'm trying to get information out there. So this past month, Texas Monthly just did a big thing. It was floating Texas and water, and they were talking about. So I grabbed it because of course that's part of my topic. So if I plug into that and using like something like Texas Monthly, is that okay? I mean, is that scientifically valid enough to help as part of my anchor, as part of my hook, and say, okay, we looked at it from the perspective of the governments and the local city councils and the local police and all that stuff, but teachers were on the front line too.
Yes.
Like where I am, Gregory Portland, we increased our enrollment by 35% in a week because we took all those kids. And so, is that enough of a hook? Is that enough of an anchor to have somebody else interested in my topic other than, me and my faculty that were involved?
So I would say you probably want to take that the next step further.
Okay.
So what are the implications of you increasing enrollment? Because again, as an outside person, hey, that's great, you got more students, but I may not be considering what kind of taxing toll does that put on teachers, resources available? How does that mess with a schedule that you've already established and put forward?
Right.
And
All
so,
those things. I mean, yes, and
Yes.
that's the basic, but they were looking at the Texas Monthly articles looked at only those government agencies. They didn't really look at the education side at all. And so, but that affects the community, because you just said,
Right.
how does this affect the community? How does this affect the surrounding areas, and why do other people care?
So if we go back to my little tree philosophy analogy there. So the problem itself can't be the problem. So the problem is not that you just took all these students, but what are the implications? Or in this case, the problem is not that coverage is not on the education side, it's more on the government, first responder side. What's the problem of that? And so that's where you could lead into, well, what is this doing to our school system? It's taxing resources.
That's already
and
taxed to the
yes.
max as it is.
So that's going to be the hook.
Okay.
That's what's going to bring people in. You then want to project forward the state of affairs if left unaddressed. So what's going to happen? Are all the red drum going to just disappear? Are we going to have no fish? Are schools going to crumble into chaos because we don't have whatever resources, accommodations, curricular offerings? All right. Now, you don't have to go overboard and make it seem like this apocalyptic vision is going to happen. But what's a realistic outcome for this? And so my line of research that I do a lot working with Hispanic student transitions to college and dealing with retention issues and things like that. And so part of the hook, the way that I tie all this in is we have large numbers of students coming in, and there's a huge gap in degree completion and retention numbers between minority students, particularly Hispanic students. And so why is that problematic? So now I could hook in my reader that we're having a bunch of individuals go to college, not be successful, drop out. They now may have accrued some type of financial debt for this school that they did. So now they're in a worse condition than they were before. And how does that affect our local community? Now we have uneducated people in our workforce that really hinders our ability to bring in new companies and businesses that are looking for a skilled college-educated workforce. And so even if you're not invested in college or the educational system, you could look at something like that and say, hey, wow, we do need to put more effort into what we're doing in colleges because this is affecting all of us. It's going to hinder jobs available in our community. It's going to potentially affect our taxes, our property value, all these things. So you get people invested who may not be in your field. Okay. And so these types of things, statistics, little known facts, quotes, things that are really stick in people's head that, hey, that's a bigger problem than I thought, something I hadn't considered before, are all helpful. So from these hooks and anchors, your general problem begins to emerge. You start to, and hopefully your readers start to understand through a linear flow that, okay, I'm following along, I'm seeing the train of thought you have. This is what a problem is. And so in that section, and again, these are very brief. Your problem statement section in a dissertation is a paragraph. And so it's not like you're expanding on this for pages and pages and pages. So you really have, much like a 30-second commercial, you have a few sentences to really bring people in. And so your problem could be general or it could be specific. As we get into the specific, that's where your dissertation comes into play. Because you're not going to solve this problem. I'm not as well versed in the fishery area, but has this been a problem with the drum and their eating habits? Has this been something that's been long-standing problem, issue?
It's like what you said earlier, why is this lack of information an issue? So there's been anecdotal evidence that red drum actually go up into the rivers.
Okay.
So they're very able to deal with low salinity, even zero salinity. So their life history right now just consists of the offshore adult stage and the estuary juvenile stage.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're looking at, are they using the rivers? Because if they are such an important and popular sport fish, could we begin to protect those environments if they're important to them at that juvenile life stage?
Mm-hmm.
So, so the lack of information is just saying that we aren't managing as well as we could.
Mm-hmm. And so it's been a question that's been out there that has...
It's been, well, anecdotally, people
Okay.
are just noticing that they live there, but then there's no source of information.
Scientific proof of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, but you also have the issue of not having enough water flowing into those rivers.
Oh, gosh.
And this is, I know, but that's an economic impact though too, because huge commercial sport fishery that in this area is very impactful, but also we're not allowing enough water to come through. That's the part of the perpetual problem, is rivers are supposed to flow to the sea, but we keep cutting them off, so.
Yeah. So your study, don't want to burst any bubbles, it's probably not going to solve all of our ecological understanding of this. All right, you in curriculum instruction, your study is not going to solve all of education's woes and problems. So while you start presenting this general problem, you want to get it specific. So what is your study going to, how are you going to chip away at this big iceberg of a problem that we've now established is out there? And then that leads to the gap. By the end of your problem statement, paragraph, 2 paragraphs if you go that long, a reader should have a really good understanding of, I could identify this is the missing element. This is the hole in our understanding that your study is going to fill. And so you want to keep it manageable. I understand from the perspective that you're in as doctoral students that your dissertation is a big project that's kind of staring you in the face that's out there. Once you graduate, and depending on what you do in your profession, if you get into faculty life, there's a saying that we have here. The worst situation you ever want to be in is a retiring faculty member whose dissertation was the best piece of research you ever contributed. And think about it. So project in the future. After you graduate, you're going to have a career, 20, 30, 40 years, however long. You want that piece of work you did as a student to be the best thing you ever did, and then you kind of peaked, and then your whole career was never lived up to that.
I don't know, I'll be 50. I'll settle for that.
That's my goal. Finish
There you
before
go.
I'm 50.
So,
I see where you're coming from.
so I put that there is realize that your study does not have to change the world. It does not have to solve all the problems. You're moving things forward. And in fact, a great idea is to have a dissertation that starts a springboard for your future research agenda, other projects that you want to do. This just provides you the base on which to go from. So I know it's a change in perspective from I was in your shoes many moons ago too, knowing that, man, this thing is just looming over my head. But make it manageable. So some things to do, and I'll show you a little template that you may find useful in adjusting for yours, but things that you want to make sure you cover in the problem statement. What's the problem? Where is it found? What needs to be done to solve it? So is retention just an issue in South Texas? Does the rest of the world have it under control? All right, so we want to contextualize it. Some cases it may be, depending on what your dissertation is, it may be specific to a certain area or a specific population. If not, you want to make that appropriate. And then what do we need to do to solve it? So here's kind of a little template. Of course, adjust this specific to your study. But there is a problem in blank. Despite whatever you want to fill in here, blank is occurring. This problem has negatively impacted blank because blank. A possible cause of this problem is perhaps a study which investigates blank using or by whatever methods could remedy this situation. So you kind of identify the problem. You start talking a little bit about what we're doing currently to address it. That just doesn't seem to be working. What the impact of that problem is, again, just the problem itself. What is its impact? What may be causing it? And then what you're going to do. You're going to look at this variable using this type of methodology may remedy the situation. So flesh that out a little bit, there's a paragraph. And so one paragraph, you could pretty much sum up what your study is designed to do. Questions on those? And so I give you an example of filling one in. And I don't want to slow us down, but you could read this. Everyone get a copy of the handouts? So you could read that. So that's just one kind of filling in the gaps. A checklist. I always find these very helpful. I'm more of a, I guess I'm a very type A type person, so I like a little checklist to make sure I have it. Things that you want to make sure that are in your problem statement. That you got the problem. Have you sufficiently convinced me, the reader, that it is a problem? Just because you think it's a problem, we may all think, no, that's not. All right? So that was the harshest piece of advice I ever got as a doc student, but probably the best piece of advice that I ever received is until you get your degree, nobody cares what you. So simple things that you could look at and see. So that leads us to a purpose statement. The purpose statement talks about why you as a researcher are conducting this study. So yes, you've identified a problem, you've contextualized this problem, you've added some dimension to this problem that hooks us in, gets us to see why this is important or relatable. Now, what's your dissertation going to do? How is this helping the situation? So here's where you talk about what you're going to accomplish or what you hope to accomplish in your study. Similar to the problem statement, you're very limited in your space. So again, about a paragraph, 2 paragraphs at most. It's funny to think about how long dissertations could be, and really the crux of them, the critical elements of it, you boil down to 2-3 pages is really your whole dissertation. But we do that in life, don't we? Have you read a book you didn't like, saw a movie you didn't like? Do you stick it out? Or sometimes, if you're not hooked and invested at the beginning, you pass and you move on. You don't see the relevance of it, you move on. And if you do watch movies all the way through, and if you don't like it, that's probably going to be a problem in your dissertation writing experience. So you need to kind of break that habit of just watching movies for the sake of watching movies, because you need to get some writing done. You need to get this process going. So some topics that you want to cover in your purpose statement. Your motivation, significance, and research questions to be addressed. So what's your motivation in this topic? How did you each come up with the topic that you're interested in? Did you just pull it out of a hat? Did you Google what's a good dissertation topic to do, and that's what came up, and you said, that's what I'm going to do? You have some investment in it. All right, so that investment could be personal experience, could be professional experience. Maybe you work in these fields. Maybe it's anecdotal stuff that you have. So all of that's going to factor into your purpose statement. Why is this important? Why is it significant? What is your study? This is not the problem, this is the significance of your study. So what is your study? Why is it significant? How is it going to add to our understanding? And there are different selling points that you can include in here. So it could be that I'm replicating an existing study, but I'm using a new population that hasn't been studied before. Or perhaps everybody has always studied this topic using quantitative measures. I'm going to approach it from a qualitative perspective. A lot of the retention literature, we focus on student characteristics and everything. Maybe it's not the student. Maybe we need to look at institutions or instructors and teachers, and what are we doing collectively that may be pushing kids away, or
it is the students, but it's not things that are easily measured.
Mhm.
Their family influence, family support, things that are very difficult to measure,
Mhm.
so people haven't done that often or that well.
So, significance of your study, what are you contributing that's new? And then talk about the research questions. That's going to bleed into the questions that you hope to address.
About how many of those do you think a dissertation should have? So that
How many research questions?
So that it remains manageable, but that it's, will pass through a department without people saying, come on, this is a real contribution.
That's a hard question to answer because I don't think there are guidelines. I mean, you could have a single question if it is something that is novel, unique, and a question could have multiple subcomponents to it as well. You definitely don't want to have too many. What's too many? I don't know if there's an exact number, but you probably start getting up at double-digit questions. You're attempting to do too much in a study. When I conduct research now, I probably limit it to no more than 5 things that I want to do, but really a lot of those are subcomponents of it. So I may be looking at a particular topic, but then that could be broken down. So if I'm looking at, I'll use the retention because that's what I do. So I'm looking at retention patterns of Hispanic students. Is it the same for male and female students? Is it the same for first-generation students or those who have had family members go to school before? And so there are subcomponents to that question I could get that get me more information, but I probably don't want to do a study that's going to compare this group and then maybe another group and another group and then this whole completely different variable. Yes?
My advisor was really great in helping me when I started figuring out research questions because he emphasized the importance of having like pillar question, like one thing that you are going to answer, and then as you added ones on, would it be the end of the world if you didn't have time or weren't able to answer those questions? So in a way, also when you get to the 4th, 5th, 6th questions, I was also things that if you didn't answer them, you might be able to.
Yeah, but it's nice because then when you go on the job market, you say, this is my research agenda because I didn't finish these things. But here they are, my dissertation is this springboard like you were talking
Yep.
about to answer these non-pillar questions. I love that word. Pillar.
So components of your purpose statement, does it have direction? Does it have scope? Does it have means? So where is this taking us? Further down the path that we've already blazed? Is it opening up a new door that we haven't looked at before? What's the scope of your study? Just here at this university, just here in this community, statewide, nationally, internationally, galactically? You don't know, there could be planets way out there we haven't discovered yet that they're having problems in their education systems too. So
Global citizens are the
There-
only ones with high persistence rates, and we just have no idea.
yeah. And then the means. So how are you going to do this? And that's where you start talking about kind of the design that you're going to use, really referencing qualitative, quantitative measures, things like that.
So the means is more on your methodology.
A brief description of it, yeah.
Okay.
So. And then, so elements of a purpose statement, another little checklist to make sure you have these in here. And as a sidebar, this also works really well too, writing abstracts. Whether you're doing a dissertation abstract or you're doing a journal article, manuscript that you're doing. But it should have in this brief little section the method you're going to use, the design you're using, the problem you're using, the population you're working with, and the setting that you're in. All of those are important because they add in elements to our understanding of this issue. So like when we're looking at, when I did my research with retention and college adjustment of Hispanic students, it's important that I talk about the setting as well. So if I conduct my research here, TAMUCC is not like every institution in the country. We're designated as a Hispanic serving institution. So this year, 48.9% of our student enrollment is Hispanic. And so that creates a different culture, dynamic, and environment than if I'm looking at how are Hispanic students adjusting to college in a place where they are the vast minority. Maybe they only have 4 or 5% of the student population. And so identifying the settings so that people could really understand how this fits in.
There's a really interesting component to that too, because I think colleges and universities like to talk about diversity and students of color, but it's not always the case that they are making a better climate.
Yes.
By diversifying, it can be often that it makes it worse
Mhm.
in the sense of sort of interest, student of color, combative behavior, and things like that.
Mhm. So let's say, I think I have an example here. So, sample purpose statement. The purpose of this quantitative correlational study was to determine the relationship between teacher job satisfaction and the teacher perceived leadership traits of principals within public schools in the coastal region of Virginia. The significance of the relationship is that it may inform an understanding of how teacher leadership influences teacher retention, which has been correlated to satisfaction. The study used validated and reliable measures to assess the variables under investigation. So you get an idea, all right, so what are we looking at right here? That there's probably a relationship between what kind of leader you have as the principal and whether you like your job working at that school. Why is that important? Well, everyone has to work, so some people like their jobs, some you don't, but you still need a paycheck. Well, because now we could underscore the problem that it leads to retention efforts. And so nationally, we see this issue that in teaching, 3 to 5 years is kind of the gap right there, where a large percentage, and it's over 50% of teachers, drop out of the profession. And so, in my perspective, that kind of perpetuates this cycle that we have, that we're constantly having turnover. We're not getting teachers that are gaining the experience and then being able to stay in the job. We're always having people learning. And so, does that hinder our educational performance because we're always having new teachers? Possibly. So in this brief little paragraph, you can see that the researcher was able to communicate all of these points we talked about. What type of study they're doing? They're doing a qualitative study. Or quantitative. They're using correlational designs. They identify the problem. They identify variables they have. They identify the population. Where is it? It's in the coastal region of Virginia. So if we put it all together, your problem should lead you to thinking about a goal of what you want your study to do. And that goal leads to a purpose. So we'll use your example. So you talked about your problem is this idea of natural disasters and how teachers participate in the aftermath of it, or how they talk about it? Or?
Well, basically kind of teachers as first responders.
Okay.
Because we're, the school system, if the school still exists, the school keeps going.
Yes.
And or even the kids where in the areas where the schools don't exist anymore, like Rockport, those kids had to go to school somewhere because of the law, because the law says they had to. So, so those teachers that, like in my school, we're still teaching, but we have all these kids coming in, it's like they don't have a home, they don't have clothes, we don't have a home because our homes were affected, but we still have to show up for work every day, or, you know.
So what's the problem if you had to narrow it down?
Well, the
Because
problem
as you
is-
talk, I could think of 4 or 5 different problems.
Well, part of the problem is if my, and I'm not saying I'm saying in general.
Yes.
If I, the teacher, if my Maslow's hierarchy of needs are not being met, how can I feel like I'm doing a good job for these students who also Maslow's hierarchy of needs aren't being met either? Because I still have to show in my performance evaluation that I am affecting their lives positively through test scores, through student engagement, just in them showing up. So how can I do a good job or feel like I'm doing a good job as a teacher when I can't even function on my own?
Sure.
So
Yeah, so that makes sense. So like I said, I was thinking of a bunch of problems you could have. So I mean, you could take a spin from it that maybe there are no formal policies on what schools do in this situation. That's a problem.
Well,
Maybe it's, as you addressed, that we have, how can someone altruistically help others when they're in need of help themselves? And so that, like you said, that idea of your hierarchy of needs, I don't have a roof over my head. I'm worried about that, but I got to do this. So, I mean, that's a problem as well. Then you have it from, what do we do with all these kids? Kind of, we talked about the logistic issue. Schools are not equipped to have these types of students. So there's a lot of problems. So you identify a problem. And so what's your goal then? Are you going to come up with a self-help plan that all teachers could do that'll make them better? Are you coming up with a way to, you talked about that you're still going to be evaluated a certain way. Are you coming up a way to alter the evaluation of teachers when something like this happens?
Yeah, or how should we alter or at least look at the teacher evaluation system, because that's a new system that we're under this year, to address this emotional element of trauma in the classroom.
Okay, so you have a problem, and then you have a goal that you want to do with it. And so what's the purpose of your study? How is your study going to achieve that goal? And so here's where you could talk about, well, how are you going to do that? Are you planning on surveying teachers, talking to teachers? So that's your purpose. That's your study is going to achieve this goal associated with that problem in this way.
We get the problem, and I feel like the goal is, so what's the end goal
Mm-hmm.
of the study? I would like to be able to contribute more information to our stakeholders about how to increase persistence rates.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm like, well, wait, no, that's the purpose.
No, so that could be your goal, but now the purpose of your particular study, how is your study going to achieve that goal?
I see.
All right, so your study is going to help inform stakeholders.
Because clearly I can't, it's back to that, you can't solve the entire problem.
Right.
You've got to solve a component of the problem.
And so I said your purpose should include discussion of your methodology in these. So is the purpose of your study to give voice to the students? That's going to inform stakeholders. Is the purpose of your study to gather institutional data and numbers? That's going to inform stakeholders.
Yeah, what I was gonna say, so you're not gonna specifically find a solution.
Correct.
You may just approach different ways
Mhm.
that you might get a solution, or things that might help.
Yes.
It's kind of like a half-done puzzle, and you're going to contribute one or two pieces, but you're not going to solve it.
Well, that's all research. So even if you find something really great, people could come back and say, well, that's just at that university. How do I know even if we went down to Kingsville, which is not even that far away? Maybe it's different there. Maybe it's different in Oklahoma. Maybe it's different in Minnesota. And so there's always going to be unknown in the research that you do. You're just providing another piece. And so I like to take a more optimistic view of research, that it's not just about opening doors, but it's about understanding what doors can be closed. We don't need to go down that path anymore. And so that relates to whether you find significant findings or non-significant findings. I think there's value in, okay, we found out that this is not a relatable variable. This is not a predictor. This is not something we need to address anymore. Well, okay, so now you've provided information to other researchers. Let's go in different directions. So it doesn't mean your study is all for naught if you don't find significant results. Right? So think of your purpose as how you're going to achieve that, the method by which you're doing this. And so I have a couple examples that tie these two together. So here are from some studies I looked at. This is a problem and a purpose statement that go combined. So the problem is there's a lack of motivation among medical personnel, which contributes to negative productivity and lack of efficiency. Poor or inappropriate leadership may result in inferior quality of patient care, decrease in employee motivation, decrease in collaboration between managers and employees, and increase in employee turnover rates. So we kind of identify what's going on, what's an issue, and we have that hook. So why do I care about my nurses or doctors' motivation to do their job? So now you start talking to me, oh, it leads to inferior quality care? So what they're providing me may not be the best because they're not motivated, they're not invested in their jobs. Okay, now you have me sold on this. Now I don't want to go to that facility anymore. And then a purpose statement. The purpose of this proposed quantitative quasi-experimental study is to determine if a change in leadership style from transactional leadership to transformational leadership over 3 months will improve motivation and increase productivity. So taking the problem to, okay, so it's one thing just to go around and point out all the problems in the world. That's easy to do. But what are you going to do about it? And so that's where your purpose statement comes in. So I'm going to do this type of design, which hopefully we'll see if this shift in leadership makes a difference. Is that the only thing? Probably not. I doubt that someone's motivation to perform their job is 100% tied to the leadership style. In fact, I bet you if we quadrupled their salary, they would somehow become more amenable to the leadership style that they couldn't stand a while ago. Yeah.
Till that high.
So did we solve the problem? No, but we got an understanding of something that may contribute to it, something that could be a part of it. There's other things it could be. It could be salary, it could be life issues, it could be the type of facility you work in. Maybe it's a high-volume medical facility. They're seeing hundreds of patients coming in every day, and they just get burnt out. So we take it a little at a time. Second example, information technology projects fail at a higher rate than projects in other industries. The high rate of failed or incomplete IT projects negatively impacts organizational performance, costing organizations more than $55 billion in losses. All right, so if we just stop at the top, how is this relatable? Now we say, wow, that's a lot of money. All right? So if I run a business, that instantly piques my interest. Hey, we're losing this kind of money. If I'm a shareholder, stockholder in a business, that piques my interest. And if you know how business works, that should pique your interest as a customer, because if the company is losing $55 billion, they don't just say, well, we tried. That's got to come back somewhere, so maybe the price of the product increases. And so now we're paying more for something. So the purpose of this proposed exploratory quantitative correlation design is to determine the factors most influential in determining project success or failure. So taking what's the problem, relating it back to what we have going on. All right. So that's kind of a quick overview of how you go from problem to purpose, and then how that would bleed into your research questions, which I think is going to be a topic of one of the upcoming sessions that you have. So any questions that you have now, I'll be glad to answer those. I know we're short on time, but I could stay for a little bit if you have specific questions. If not, there's my contact information. You can email me, call me. You can come stop by if you want. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have. Anything I could address now? All right, well, I appreciate you all coming. Thank you.